This time, Dallas Tornadoes, 1967, a genuine tour de force.
No, nay, never. No, nay, never, no more. 'Cause I'll stay a wild rover forever and more.
Hello and welcome to By Far the Greatest Team, a podcast in which football fans attempt the impossible to rank once and for all who is the greatest team of all time. My name is Dunn, and as ever, I will be stating the case for Oxford United, and our king of the data, and there's plenty of data, or at least miles, to be monitoring on this one, is, as ever, it's Jamie Rooney.
25,000 miles of data, I believe. Yeah, I'm JR. I don't have any oil reserves, but I'm ready for this episode of Dallas.
I can see what you've done there. I should have thought of that. All those possible Dallas puns, and I missed the obvious one. Oh, well, there you go.
Do you know what? How are you going to get an Oxford United reference in tonight? Don't spoil it, 'cause I know you've got it there, but I mean, I did a bit of research thinking the way he's going to go with this, and but yeah, I don't know how you're going to do it.
Often challenged, but have I managed it this time? We will see. Yes, we are doing Dallas Tornadoes, and as this is a dive through history and a bit of geography, we thought who better to join us than our Northeast correspondent, but increasingly our globetrotter. It's Phil Craig.
Yeah, I'm being let out of my box a little bit. I can't compete with Jamie's puns, far from it. I do have in my back pocket, although it is very tangential, one reference to Sunderland, the mighty Sunderland, but we'll see whether I can kind of weave it in or not.
I'm already pretty confident I know where it's coming, but as I too have one Sunderland reference, so I wonder if it's the same one. But before we, so we're going to dive into Dallas Tornadoes, and just as a heads up, very few people will know anything about this team or this story. It is absolutely mad and absolutely insane. You think sort of English Premier League teams hopping over to Dubai or something ahead of, going over to Asia ahead of the start of the season. It's taking its toll, has a bit of an impact. Maybe is nothing compared to the madness of this tour. But before we get stuck in, I do have two tiny bits of any other business to pick up from the pod we did on Panathinaikos. So firstly, Jamie, I don't know if so one of the things I had noticed in this, because and for this background to this, there was a very famous goal that Panathinaikos scored at Goodison Park, the tall guy, as he was known, and it's called the 5-9s goal, I think it was, wasn't it, Jamie?
The 5-9s it was. And
5-9s.
I think I can remember what they were as well.
Go on, Jamie. Can you read them out again?
So the number 9, the tall guy, sorry, Gus.
Antonis Antionadas.
Thank you. Yeah, I apologise to Gus. He wore number 9. Mm-hmm. He scored in the 81st minute. There was 9 minutes remaining. It was his 9th goal of the campaign.
Mm-hmm.
It was on the March the 9th,
mm-hmm.
and the goal was scored precisely at 9 p.m. at night. I think they are the 5-9s.
They are the 5-9s. So they are the 5 that I saw. I just, when I was looking back on it, I thought, oh, this is quite interesting, isn't it? Because he scores 1 goal in the first game against the Luxembourg side. Then he scores 4 in the next round. And then he scores 2 goals in quarter-final, in the second round. And I think his goal against Everton is his 8th.
That sounds like 8 to
2,
me.
because he finishes with 10, and he ends up with, he scores 2 in the semi-final, in the home leg. So I don't quite know how it adds up.
Well, maybe it does. Gus had never heard of it, and he's Panathinaikos through and through. I mean, there's a man who absolutely knew Panathinaikos inside out. And when I raised this statistic, and it just really raises the question, should this man be responsible for statistics on this particular podcast? He did seem a bit baffled by it. He didn't seem to know about it, even though I was super proud that, this was a thing. So maybe I got it off some rogue website that had generated an AA block.
I've seen it described as that as well. I mean, 4-9s is impressive as it is. So, you know, you didn't need the 5th 9, but maybe there was another goal somewhere along the lines. But the other bit of business, during that pod, we were also talking about green kits, a favourite of ours. And I think we suggested that no team has ever played in the top flight of the English League in a green home kit.
We did say that. We did. Did we get it wrong?
Well, I thought I would look it up. I think I found some. I think Bradford Park Avenue played in a green kit in about 1914 or something like that. A green and white kit.
Wow. Bradford Park Avenue. I completely forgot about them. Yeah, they were a big deal at the time. I think they fell out the league around the mid-1970s. And there's a debate going on. Is Bradford big enough for 2 football teams? Surely there's a case for it.
Absolutely. So there we go. I thought I would flag that one. Bradford Park Avenue changed their kit, bizarrely, but were, it seems, wearing green and white during their stay at the top of the table. Anyway, we should plough on with this week's team, and it is Dallas Tornadoes. And, I mean, they are a team, but actually, well, I mean, ahead of this, they're not, they weren't a team, I guess. So, Jamie, can you give us a sort of quick intro to who are Dallas Tornadoes, or who were they?
Who were they? They did exist for some time, from the late 1960s, 1967, through to the early 80s, I think it was. And they played in the North American Soccer League, our favourite league, Graham, where we've covered the New York Cosmos, or Cosmos as they were called when we covered them, and the fantastic Rochester Lancers, who would also have been established in 1967. They are the brainchild of an incredible guy who we'll go on and talk about a bit more, and I think we'll get Phil involved in that, called Lamar Hunt. And absolutely, I mean, if we're talking about Lamar Hunt, we're probably on the wrong type of football podcast. I think anyone who's familiar with the American football game will absolutely know who Lamar Hunt is. He is responsible for coining the term Super Bowl. He did it just as a kind of tongue-in-cheek reference to establish the AFC and the NFC to play the championship game. But we could talk a bit more about that as well, because I've actually done a bit of American football research on this one. But yeah, Lamar Hunt, he was from Dallas, born into a son of an oil tycoon. He was a sporting enthusiast, not just American football. He was a visionary as well. And he could see there was a future in soccer. He had been to watch Shamrock Rovers in 1962 and had developed a taste for the game of associated football. And in 1966, he came to England and he followed the World Cup. And he since then went to watch every World Cup after that for the next 10 editions, I believe. And being a local boy from Dallas, he wanted to create a football team. So he created the Dallas Tornado. Now, the Dallas Tornado played one season in the USA Association League. It only existed for one season. And then shortly after that, that was merged with the US Professional Soccer League, and the NASL was born, and Dallas Tornado were a founding member.
And it's worth saying, I guess, about US football at this stage, this is very much in the form, the foundations stage and the of the league. And you have the North American Soccer League isn't quite what it was to become at that stage. And the ASL, there were two or three leagues going on at the same time as the foundations there. And it's also fair to say there are very few, if any, US players. So this is essentially an expat game of sorts.
Yeah, that's quite a key point, because in 1967, when the Dallas Tornado play their very first season, they don't play in the North American Soccer League because it doesn't exist. They play in the season I mentioned, the United States Soccer Association. It's a single league, and the teams are made up from Boston, Chicago, Houston, LA, New York, San Francisco, Washington. But all of the players are gathered from English and European teams. So the Dallas Tornado were represented by Dundee United, and in that Dundee United team was Walter Smith. Walter Smith would have played for the Dallas Tornado in this single season. The Los Angeles Wolves, who were playing at the Coliseum in Los Angeles, a 93,000 capacity, they were represented by Wolverhampton Wanderers. They actually won the whole thing. So yeah, you're right, Graham. It was a North American soccer league, but there was very little Americans playing in the North American Soccer League. It was made up by players that we've become familiar with. Derek Dugan was playing at this particular moment. We've referenced him before as well.
Now, that list of teams, there are a string of UK teams who, and not just UK teams, there's a string of teams that help make up these 10 sides. Phil, are you aware of who all these teams were represented by?
There's one that stands out, isn't there? So there's the Vancouver Royals. The Vancouver Royals were hugely fortunate to be represented by Sunderland. In the season that we're talking about, riding out for the Vancouver Royals were players as esteemed as Jimmy Montgomery, Cecil Irwin, Colin Todd, Jim Baxter, John O'Hare, George Mulhall. Brilliant. Fantastic team. Mainly Scots and English in that Sunderland team at the moment, and managed by another Scottish manager, Ian McCall. To be honest, while there were some standout players in that team, it wasn't really the best team. I think in a year or two, Sunderland were relegated again, but it must have been quite an adventure for those Sunderland, Dundee, Wolverhampton and other players.
Yeah, because the tournament was played, that one single season, the USA, that was played during the summer months. So it was quite easy for players to go and play in North America in this upstart league.
So have I understood this right? So this is 1967 and the season is going to begin in 68. Dallas Tornadoes have previously been represented by Dundee United, but now they have to establish a team of their own. They have to get their players. And, I mean, you would normally kind of maybe recruit from the area or local clubs, and there is a kind of amateur football that's being played there, even though it's not a particularly popular sport in the US. There's a lot of expat football going on in there. So that would seem the more, quite an obvious way of recruiting, but Dallas Tornadoes approach it slightly differently, don't they?
They do. So Lamar Hunt has the challenge, really, doesn't he? If it's not Dundee United, then who's it going to be? First of all, he needs to find a coach. And this is where another remarkable character called, Bob Kap, we'll call him. He went by other names, Robert Kapustin or Biadar Nikolaevich Kapusto, because he was born in North Macedonia, which was then part of Yugoslavia. He'd played a fair bit of professional football in Hungary. He'd managed a few teams in Bulgaria, but he moved to Canada in 1956 after the Hungarian Revolution. Not the last reference to world events in this podcast. He dabbled in a bit of amateur coaching, but he really was working as a journalist, which is where he made contact with Lamar Hunt, who needed a head coach. So Kap apparently told Hunt that he had studied alongside the Hungarian legend Ferenc Puskás, and was a graduate as a coach from the University of Budapest, which I think seems to be accurate because some of the players in later interviews suggest that they did actually meet Puskás on the tour. And he was the godfather to Kap's daughter. Kap was asked by Lamar to get a team, form a team. And what better way to do that than to travel hundreds of miles to Europe and scour the amateur leagues of England and the rest of Europe for players. So that's exactly what Kap did. He went around, he talked to local coaches, scoured the local leagues, spent a lot of time in England, but also other parts of Europe, and assembled a team of players that were capable of kind of competing, not first of all in the World Tour, but then later in the new embryonic league. So I think it took him around 6 months travelling around Europe. He initially hired 18 young unknown players, England, Norway, Sweden, the Netherlands. I think some replacements joined later on. He only selected one American player out of that whole team. Only one American player, so it was hardly local. And none of the team had ever visited Dallas.
So none of the players were American, but it was quite important that they looked American, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a conscious decision.
I think as they travelled around, short-cut hair, nice suits, but brilliantly. And this kind of goes back to Jamie's references at the beginning of Dallas. They had to wear Stetsons. How great is that?
Yeah, and they took the Stetsons on tour of them as well.
Yeah.
There's a brilliant, there's a great website that we've referenced previously, Graham, when we did the Rochester Lancers, the NASL jerseys.com. It's incredibly rudimentary in terms of its visual appeal, but the amount of quality information on there is fantastic. And it's got an archive of pictures of the team. And they've got the classic team picture. And instead of being dressed in the football kit, they're actually wearing their Stetsons. They've got this necktie on. They've got cowboy shirts on. And the back row are standing while the front row are on their knees. And the back row have all got their thumbs tucked into the top of their jeans in unison. It's all American. It really is fantastic.
I think where quite a lot of the detail from this tour comes from is the memories of Bill Crosby, who was an English player on that tour, and I think he was the one who was kind of working as a bus conductor on the buses. And was he in Liverpool? And he basically had the classic Beatles. They're past the Mophead stage by then. They're in the full George Harrison, Sgt. Pepper era, and the one when Bob Kap gave him the nod that he needed him to come and join the tour. We need you tomorrow, but you are going to have to get your hair cut before you come out.
Yeah, and Bill Crosby is fundamentally important to the storytelling because the site reference NASL jerseys.com, most of the content has been supplied. We probably should stress this is the Dallas Tornado, Bill Crosby, not to be confused with other slightly tainted Bill Crosbys that may be in North America. A moment's notice. And he and it's brilliant as well. It's wonderful because he joined the team late. So he joined in the end of September. He didn't give it a second thought. He just got home. He went to a friend that was a hairdresser late at night, cut his hair, packed a suitcase and was down to London and off to Nice within hours. I mean, he didn't really give it a second thought. He saw the opportunity. He was absolutely young, free and single. And who wouldn't want to go and tour the world at that particular moment? We should remember this is the 1960s. Now, I don't think any of us lived through the 1960s. I think I'm fairly safe saying that. I hope I am. I only know the 60s and what they were through second-hand accounts through my dad, who talked about them endlessly. But it was a time of free will, and Bill Crosby definitely exercised his free will to go on one of the greatest football tours there's ever been.
So it's quite true. As you say, he actually joins fractionally late. So this tour kicks off with a training camp in Spain in August. So I think is that where it officially begins?
Yeah, it is. And just before, I mean, obviously Phil can come in on that, but I just wanted to kind of give a bit of context, actually, just to kind of help with Lamar Hunt, who we should really talk about at length. I mean, we could just turn this into a Lamar Hunt podcast. So I'd be quite comfortable with that, to be honest. He is fascinating. So he's Dallas through and through, and he's attached to American football teams. So he wanted to, in the late 1950s, he wanted to purchase a franchise in the NFL, the National Football League, and he was denied. So he just decided, and this really kind of gives us an idea of the character of Lamar Hunt. So he decided, I'll just create my own league, then I can have my own team. So he creates the AFL Football League, or the AFC, I think it was called, the American Football Conference. My NFL knowledge is pretty bad. And he creates the Dallas Texans. And later they become the Kansas City Chiefs. And I'm pretty sure that most people have heard of the Kansas City Chiefs. And he goes on and he's the owner for many, 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 many years. So a proud Texan, proud Dallas individual. And we shouldn't forget that Dallas in 1967 had a bit of a reputation around the world as not gleaming. It was only 4 years previous to this that the assassination of President John F. Kennedy had taken place in Dallas. And the ripples of what Dallas was to people around the world showcased Dallas in not the greatest light. So I think, as Phil absolutely detailed when Bob Kap set the idea up to Lamar Hunt. I think Lamar Hunt was thinking, now here's an opportunity for us as a group of individuals to put Dallas in a positive light and send positive messages about Dallas. And I think that may be the roots of why Lamar Hunt thought this football tour that Bob Kap had was a great idea.
Yeah, I think that sounds right. I think it was multiple reasons for the tour, if not the full extent of the tour. And I think that in terms of changing the perceptions of Dallas and the state, Texas as well, was a big part of that. I don't think it was the only reason. Lamar Hunt was a significant entrepreneur. So we wanted to kind of establish the Tornado in Dallas as a brand and set it apart from other US soccer or football teams. And then I think he also had a wider agenda, which we'll see maybe later in terms of other sports as well, not just American football, but soccer and moving into other sports like tennis. He wanted to kind of promote soccer at a time when really, I'll keep using the word soccer, it seems relevant and right when we're talking about America, when soccer was really kind of still a relatively niche sport in the United States. So the tour was an opportunity to showcase the sport, then to build domestic as well as international enthusiasm for it. And then I think the final point, which is probably kind of closer to Kap, was that he'd assembled a team from everywhere they hadn't even kind of met before, a completely newly formed team. So the tour provided an extended pre-season, a really extended pre-season for the players, so they could kind of bond and test themselves against various playing styles. In some
that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Sorry, because the football season, the North American Soccer League season is set to start in April 1968. The bonding session starts in August 1967. This is the pre-season, 7 months.
It is an extraordinary pre-season tour. 7 months worth of activity. Just on Lamar Hunt, because we probably won't find any other opportunity to put it in, but he was clearly an entrepreneur of it all. And my favourite part of him is that during the 1970s, he and his brothers, William Herbert Hunt and the fantastically named Nelson Bunker Hunt, which is an absolutely tremendous name, attempted to corner the global silver market. And between them, the Hunt brothers at one stage owned around a third of the world's silver. I think initially quite profitable. It does end in something that was known within the precious. If we were on the precious metals industry, by far the greatest pod, we'd be talking about Silver Thursday, the crash of the silver market. But I just love the idea that at one stage in the late 70s, Lamar Hunt and his brothers owned a third of the world's silver.
Yeah, he definitely had the resources to exercise his will, but he was an incredibly generous individual and a very astute individual as well. For everything I've learned about him, he's incredibly well respected, especially in North American football, but as Phil's already mentioned, tennis as well. I mean, he's pretty much the man that starts the journey of what becomes the ATP, the men's tennis tour. Lamar Hunt is responsible for funding what was the WTC, the World Tennis Championships, which becomes the ATP. But he's very well respected. He's incredibly well liked. The US Open Cup that takes place in the United States right now and has done for almost 110 years. In fact, it's the longest continuous sporting competition in the United States, and it's football, soccer. I'm really comfortable with the word soccer as well, by the way. It is an English word. It did come from England. It's not the US have just adopted it. That's now named the Lamar Hunt US Open Cup.
What's sort of clear is there's no lack of ambition and enterprise from Lamar Hunt, and the approach to Dallas Tornadoes, and this is at the absolute infancy of soccer in the US, the desire to be a fundamental driving part of that, which Dallas Tornadoes are throughout the first iteration of the North American Soccer League is sort of clear to see. So they go on this tour, which starts in August in Spain at a kind of training camp. Is that about right?
There's a pre-World Tour training camp, which starts in Spain. Doesn't necessarily start very well. They get slightly clobbered by Cordoba, 4-0. It does involve a little kind of bit of a trip across the Mediterranean as well, into Morocco and into Tangier as well. So they play 5 games in the sun just to kind of warm up for the World Tour. They win 3 of them, they lose 2. So they're in relatively stable political and economic conditions. They're doing reasonably well, and they've started to kind of bond together. But that's just the start of the tour, really.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose this was to kind of get them used to what was to come. But the other fact that probably doesn't get them used to playing is that these games are all about a week apart, and there's a small amount of travelling. Whereas as the tour progresses, travelling distances get further and the games get closer in.
Yeah, as we'll find out, there's some situations where they're playing within hours of life-threatening conditions, which is just remarkable, which I look forward to getting towards. But yeah, the Cordoba game, when they play and they lose 4-0, they didn't even know they were playing that game. They got a phone call. They arrived for this training camp, and Bob Kap took a phone call from the president of the Cordoba football team, who boasted that they'd just beaten Real Madrid the week before, and they should play a friendly. And without Kap having any opportunity to say yes or no, it was arranged. And it should be pointed out, I mean, Lamar Hunt, this is the only time he travelled with the team. So he did go to Spain. He was in Spain. And, even though they got off to this incredibly bad start, it didn't stop Lamar Hunt's vision of what was going to become of this football team. Or more than that, as we could talk about what soccer will become in the United States. And I think that was more of the vision, as Phil's mentioned, is like to grow a franchise in Dallas for soccer, but also to grow soccer in the United States of America, which is important to him. So he kept with the program of work and backed Kap, even though he did get off to an awful start, losing 4-0 against Cordoba. But they go on in the next 3 games and they do pretty well.
The tour starts in earnest, I guess, in October. From what I can make of it, it begins in Turkey before a trip to Greece. And I mean, this is probably the first point at which the events which seem to just kind of surround this tour first kick in, because had everything gone according to the original schedule, this tour would be known altogether differently, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that's right. We're talking about October 1967, so they're pretty much, in the embryonic stage of their world tour. They were in Athens during a pit stop in Greece, and they were on the Tornado players are on a scheduled flight to Nicosia, Cyprus, which they miss. I'm not sure why they missed it, Jamie. I don't know if you picked that up, but it's very fortunate that they did miss the flight, because the original flight they were scheduled to be on was actually kind of blown up by terrorists in midair in an assassination attempt on the Greek Cypriot general George Grievous. Now, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly or whether it was a Star Wars reference, but a General Grievous being blown up just made me chuckle when I kind of read about that. The remarkable thing was that when the team did eventually get onto their flight to Nicosia, not only, they were on the flight with General Grievous as well. So, there must have been some kind of trepidation on that particular flight.
It is incredible because the game, they're due to fly out on October the 12th. And I think from what I understand, they missed it because they were enjoying sightseeing. And I think sightseeing was part, and growing and expanding the players' mind was part of what Bob Kap was trying to do with his team. It's not just develop them as football players, but also develop them as men, young men, individuals. And he was very keen for them to drink in the culture of the places they went to. So I think they got drunk on the culture of Greece, taking the Acropolis, and they missed their flight. And you're right, the general missed the flight as well. But what's incredible is that, I mean, I can't imagine it in this day and age. They took the very next flight out. Now, what I haven't established, and Flight Radar 24 doesn't give me this history, unfortunately, and maybe we can lean on our aviation expert for this one. It doesn't tell us whether the flight they took out from Athens to Nicosia was before the first flight they were due on, the aircraft was bombed, or whether they knew that the aircraft was bombed and it was something they learned afterwards, because they have a game scheduled in Cyprus on October the 13th, which they play. So they've come from Istanbul, where they've played Fenerbahce and got a credible 2-2 draw in front of quite a big crowd. They've gone via Athens, narrowly missed being killed in a terrorist attack, and then the very next day they're playing in Nicosia.
So I can't. I should look that detail up. Actually, I would be surprised if the flights were that frequent. I think they must have known by that stage. But as you say, it seems extraordinary to take off, especially with the intended target on board. Although it does take them a while to identify what the possible cause is. I think the initial theory was that it actually had some kind of mid-air collision, and it was only when a seat cushion cover is discovered and there's some explosive material on it that the direction of the inquiry goes elsewhere. So it is possible that they don't really kind of know what's happened, even if it has sort of taken off. We won't know what's happened because full details. There's quite a lot of mystery around what happened on that flight and the exact story behind it. The UK Home Office documents about it. British European Airways was a UK airline who were operating the flight for Cyprus Airways. The UK Home Office will disclose that information in 2067. So we can do part two of the podcast then. Yeah. Stay tuned. 43 years time. 42 years now.
Yeah. It's great to have an aviation journalist on the pod, isn't it?
It just takes it to another level. It really does.
This does touch on. We had Michael Lewis on the podcast last year talking about the Rochester Lancers, and we'll talk a bit more about them probably in a bit as part of this. And what's clear is if you want to play sport in the US, you have to travel by flight. That it's the nature of the country. So in many ways, when we look at the flight schedule that they're following on this world tour, which seems mad, but actually this is what these US teams were doing in the US League, and they would have kind of back-to-back games quite often, and it would be Rochester v Dallas, and then they had to fly down to Dallas and then fly back, and Michael Lewis, who wrote a fantastic book about Rochester Lancers. He had several stories of near misses and accidents potentially in that period. So I think whilst it seems kind of really weird to do it at this stage, and your immediate action would be, if you were that close to a potential, should we just finish this tour? But no, they play it on, and they play almost immediately afterwards, don't they? They play back-to-back games in Cyprus on the 13th and the 14th, the day afterwards. No time for any settling back. And another theme that seems to be there is the second game. As part of this brilliant website that Jamie's talked about, we have score lines, we occasionally have goal scorers, but we also occasionally have temperatures. They do definitely appear to be playing in quite hot weather. So the temperature in that second game is 95 Fahrenheit.
The whole tour, it's almost like they're professional cricketers. They're following the sun. The whole tour. I'd love to know what the coolest day was that they played in, but I don't think it would be below 90 because, as we find out, wherever they travel to, it's bloody hot.
Yeah, they've still got to go to Iran after that, haven't they? Got a special game against the Iran Air Force, which is, interesting along that. Pakistan, and then through to India after that in October and into November.
Yeah, so when they get to Iran and they play, the first game is against the Iranian Air Force. They play 4 games in Iran, and this becomes more of a theme in terms of the volume of games that they're playing in these countries that they're traveling to. And I think just for interest, we should point out, so far, just to keep our listeners intact, they've started off in Spain, they've popped over to Morocco, they've had a brief stop, which we didn't mention, in Nice, France. This is where Bill Crosby got involved in the team. They then played their first official game in Turkey. They've had some sightseeing in Greece, and they've played a couple of games in Cyprus. They've then travelled to Beirut, Lebanon, in transit to get to Iran. So now they arrive in Iran, where they take on the first of their 4 football matches.
And these are 4 matches which they play across, I think, 5 days, is it? So they play on the 17th of October, the 18th of October, the 19th?
20, yeah.
20th and the 22nd.
Yeah, pretty much every 2 days, apart from the first 2 games, which are played back-to-back days.
So I like the last game they play a team in Shahir, which they play after a 7.5 coach journey and played in the afternoon. Just one line seems to be there. Shahir is 5,000 feet up in the mountains.
It also highlights what Bob Kap was trying to do, because I think bonding players was really important to him. And I think he looked, and what he would do as well, he would regularly change the room arrangements around. So he'd make sure that the same players weren't sharing the same rooms. So he wanted to create cohesion. And during this trip to Iran, where they're in Tehran, one of the players, Graham Sterling, who joined in France, has been taken off to the toilets, and no one really thinks anything of it, by one of the club officials. And the club official returns, but Graham Sterling doesn't. He's been sent home. And he's been sent home on the basis that Bob Kap doesn't believe he's gelling and bonding with his teammates. He's too quiet. He doesn't get involved. You know, he likes to be in the corner reading his book and not getting involved with the banter of what's going on in the team. So I think it kind of demonstrates what Bob Kap was trying to do. It was like, we're in this together. You either get involved and you get on board with the vision, or you get out. Sent back to the UK, not the US, clearly, because as we know, only one player, Jay Moores, is the only US representative in this team.
So another lengthy coach journey back to Tehran, and then they head to Karachi. By this stage, a Norwegian player, Tom Weinholt, goes home with a knee injury. So they're down to 16. It's quite impressive to only have to still have 16 fit and available players. So they head to Karachi, where they play the Pakistan national side, and it's worth flagging in this one the attendance, because this game, the 2 games in Karachi, as a couple of the later games, have a huge attendance, don't they?
Yeah, 35,000 is what's been recorded, and this sets a theme because there's interest in this team, in this tour. The momentum of who the Dallas Tornado are and the journey that they're on, traveling around the world, and they literally do travel around the world during this tour, is growing. And 35,000 is an incredibly impressive crowd, and it's not the smallest. They go on and they actually attract bigger attendance figures in some of the games that they play elsewhere in the world.
It's also worth saying that first game against the Pakistan national side, which takes place just 4 days after they played in Iran. Now, if I've understood this right, because we've not talked very much about the performances, but I think that might be their first win of this tour. Does that sound about right to you?
Oh, well, they won, when we exclude 5 games they played in Spain and Morocco, they have won 3 games there. But Graham, this is really stat impressive, because
I think that is their a series of draws. In fact, most of the games so far have been drawn. They've either drawn or lost all the games that I can see on this stage. Before they play the Pakistan national team, they win 2-0, very successful result. The Pakistan national team respond suitably and pick 11 different players for the double-header game and beat them in the return game. That sounds to me like maybe they had underestimated the strength of these visiting cowboys, who bizarrely none of them spoke with American accents. So they get their first win in Pakistan, followed by defeat, with only a couple of months through the tour. Where do they go next? We'll tell you in the second half.
Hey, Graham, I'm just off to get my halftime bovril and pie. I heard we're growing. We're expanding. like the universe. We're expanding. What else is happening? We've got so much going on right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got to point you in the direction of the new, by far the greatest team newsletter.
Wow, a newsletter. What could be news? Tell me more, Graham.
We're coming at you every week with a free, I should stress, free newsletter, where we're going to go take a deep dive into one of the teams that we talk about on the podcast. Some weeks will be the team that we're doing this week. The weeks it will be one from the past to be whichever random team we want to talk about. And we're going to try and use this to knit together one or two of the common themes that keep cropping up in this podcast.
Wow, and there are so many common themes as well. Next, we'll be making YouTube videos or something crazy like that, Graham.
Absolutely. So you can see us in visual splendor. Yes, so keep an eye out on YouTube and on YouTube Shorts, because we're going to be putting together a whole series of clips, mini clips and bits and pieces from our podcasts over the 3 seasons we've done so far. We thought a nice little way to pick out some of the more entertaining bits that we've covered over this period. How can people find that?
So we are on X still for the moment. That changed. I believe you are said and done, Dunn. I am Couch Pundito. We're also on Blue Sky, and we are in the process of polishing up a shiny new website, which will have this content and links to this amazing newsletter. By far, the greatest team is growing, and a new shiny website, is not so far away.
So, plenty to tuck into. Now, I think we might have finished our bovril. I've finished my pie. It's on for the second half.
Enjoy the second half, Graham. I can't wait.
Excellent. So welcome back. We had left the Dallas Tornadoes in Pakistan. They had secured their first victory of the tour proper, only to be beaten immediately afterwards. One thing I had noticed that the program for it, this is one of the images attached to it, is see 2 football giants in action, America, brackets, Tornado Dallas, versus the Pakistan national team in a test match. So I like the idea that the cricket test match approach, they sort of tried to carry it on. And, another of the newspaper headlines at the time, second soccer test today. So, yeah, no, I like that idea. It could have continued. The tour continues in Pakistan. In fact, so they go to Dhaka next, which is now Bangladesh, but it was East Pakistan at the time, I think. They play in front of another 25,000 fans in that one. They get a draw. And then there's a second game the following day, of course, because why wouldn't you play back-to-back games in Chittagong? And what was the weather temperature test on that one?
Yeah, it was a long day from Dhaka to Chittagong. They had to get a flight, and it was very hot. Bill Crosby, I think it's his notes, has just noted in his account. I don't know what the temperature was, but it was very hot. That's about as English as it gets, really, isn't it?
I'm sort of guessing that game finishes 0-0. Oh yeah, I mean, in fact, the even better. We don't know who they're playing because in the notes on this one it just says team ? So I mean, it's. I'm thinking that really the heat was really the main takeaway. No goals in that one, goalless draw. So the logistics of doing this travel is incredible. How they could possibly do that. And of course, you are talking about multiple nationalities. Now, you would expect some kind of challenges in getting from country to country, particularly countries which maybe have a bit of local tensions amongst them. And Phil, it's about now that they hit some more challenges.
Yeah, they're trying now to make their way into India. But unfortunately, only some of the team, the English players, had the correct visas. If you were British or Commonwealth, you needed one visa. But if you were outside of that, a very different visa. So there was essentially one part of the team that could make its way through into India, and another part of the team which was just stranded until they could get their hands on the necessary visas to leave what is now Pakistan and enter India. So the team had to seek shelter in what's been variously described as a local hotel, but by others, including some of the players, as a jungle hut with only 2 beds, a few chairs, no electricity, and no running water. And they were effectively stranded there for 36 hours before a local man shows up with the player's visa. But that adventure doesn't end there, because the team then travelled to the border on a bus. The bus has no seats, so all of the players are sitting on their suitcases as they rumble through the jungle. They arrive at the border control. The officer in charge of the border control has gone to sleep, and he's left strict orders that not to be disturbed. So you might have thought, well, you could wait a bit, wait for him to wake up. But unfortunately, the visas, this is really unfortunate, the visas were only valid to midnight, and it's 10 o'clock at night. So you've got 2 hours to make your way through the border or remain stranded in the Bengali jungle in the hut-stroke hotel. So fortunately for them, there's one of the local border guards who says, look, I'm not going to wake up the officer in charge, but what I can do is I can, rather than going through the official border, I can take you on a short walk through a jungle, and Bengali jungle, so I'm thinking tigers, for example, where they kind of cut a hole in the fence and the team crawl through the fence, make their way into India, catch the bus, and are then on their way to India for the next game, which I believe is in Calcutta. They arrive at the hotel in Calcutta at 6 o'clock in the morning, which is just hours before the game that they've got to play against the Indian FA 11. And this is the kind of slightly remarkable team. They're playing an Indian national team, and they do, to their eternal credit after that adventure, certainly for the non-British players, they managed to get a 0-0 draw. So good on them.
It's absolutely incredible. And I think the one that really caught my eye, there's a great newspaper headline in the Odessa headline: Dallas team is missing. They really were up against it. And as you say, you're just trying to consider the logistics, getting this globe crossing team across. They do make it to India, as you rightly say, to Calcutta. They play 5 games over there. True to form, they draw most of these. I mean, they draw them 0-0, 1-1, 2-2, and randomly 5-5 draw in Bombay against the President's 11. It's worth noticing in that one that the temperature had cranked up from 95 degrees in New Delhi to 105 degrees in Bombay, which might go some way to explaining why that game was a bit more open, you would imagine. So quite something. And again, the crowds here are tremendous. It's playing in front of 25,000, 30,000 for all those games. They end their Indian adventure with another game against the Indian national team, which they do claim a victory in 4-1. So they're really up and running by now. And so the tour continues. So where do they head to next, Phil?
They're off to Sri Lanka, I think, at this point. So they're travelling from Madras to Colombo, was then Ceylon, now Sri Lanka. They have 2 games against Colombo in 2 days, 2 or 3 days, before travelling later. So maybe there was a little kind of a respite in Sri Lanka, because they played their first game on the 22nd against Ceylon, second again against Ceylon, 24th. They have a 5-day gap before they travel to Burma, where they've got a game on the 29th with Rangoon. So while there's a 5-day gap, the problem is, of course, they've got to get all the way from Sri Lanka to Burma. And this involves yet another visit in transit to Calcutta. So they're traveling from Sri Lanka to Burma via Calcutta on the 25th of November, I think it was. But it's pretty unfortunate for the tornado. When they arrive in Calcutta, they have to seek refuge in a local hotel because all the flights were cancelled due to riots, which were being caused by mounting tensions between the local Hindu and Muslim communities. There were at least, I think, 2 days of riots, arson and looting that took place while the team were stuck in their hotel room. and it was and they were able, as the tensions started to decrease, the airport opened and they were able to kind of resume their journey on the way to Burma.
Just incredible stuff. They head to Burma, where they have 2 more games. They, having lost both games in Sri Lanka, they proceed to lose both games in Burma. But this is extraordinary. Actually, they play 2 games on the 28th and 30th of November, and across the 2 games they watched by over 90,000 fans, which is just extraordinary, really. You know, these are just kind of amateur footballers randomly plucked together from Europe. So quite something. They then head to Singapore, and looking at things through the lens of today, you know, you would view that actually they put the hard miles in. They've been through, you know, Iran, they've been through Pakistan and India. Singapore, you might think things might kind of ease up a little bit in terms of the travel and maybe the political situation there. But Phil, Singapore turns out to be another challenge.
So there was a certain degree of antipathy with US foreign policy, I think, particularly in Asia and more particularly in Vietnam. So in Singapore, they faced a pretty hostile crowd when they're playing against the Sino-Malays team. A lot of the crowd were shouting "Yankees go home," for example. And they became particularly kind of incensed when a Tornado player, Per Larsen, fouls one of the local players, who then goes about attacking Per Larsen with a corner flag. And it seems to escalate from that point onwards. The crowd start throwing stones and other objects onto the pitch. Per perhaps doesn't help the situation by bowing to the crowd, drawing further attention to himself. Ultimately, the Tornado team had to be escorted from the pitch. They had to stay in their dressing room for 2 hours after the game, and a rematch the next day, perhaps understandably, was cancelled, and they tried to get out of Singapore as quickly as they possibly could.
Again, some fantastic reporting at the time. This showing the important Liverpool angle, I think, for whoever they're reporting from. So byline is Singapore, but Dallas Tornadoes, the American Soccer League team, which signed up several players from Merseyside during the summer, including Dave Moorcroft, ex-Skelmersdale United, was stoned here last night by spectators after being beaten 4-2 in an exhibition game.
In fairness, there were a lot of people getting stoned in the 1960s.
Yes.
I mean, this is incredible. You've gone to a football match in Singapore on this incredible tour, and you've got these Chinese militants chanting, "Go home, Yankees, Yankee imperialists." They're from Dallas. The Yankees are in the north. I mean, the ignorance is crazy.
This is true. So Singapore, they cut their losses and head off to Jakarta in Indonesia. I think it's starting to look like they might be getting a little bit tired at this stage. There's a lot of miles on the clock, a lot of travel. Games, you know, very hot temperatures. They lose 2-0 and 6-1 to the Indonesian national team. And I mean, they've really taken in all kind of countries at this stage, and they've taken on some very countries in difficult positions and different states. We've referenced already that the US policy, the US war in Vietnam, which is ongoing, and the backdrop to this, which was pretty unpopular in Singapore, and unpopular enough that the players got stoned by angry local fans. I mean, obviously, it's not like this team are about to go to Vietnam during the Vietnam War. I mean, they wouldn't do that, would they, Phil?
Yeah, they would. They would travel from Jakarta to Vietnam and actually play 2 games there. So they had 2 games. First, on the 14th of December, against the South Vietnam youth, those that are not fighting in the war, I guess. And on the 16th of December, again in Saigon, against the Saigon 11. To be fair, actually, and the game itself, the matches that they played were relatively subdued, certainly kind of compared to their experience in Singapore. Although, actually, being an American in Vietnam was probably kind of slightly dangerous and slightly unusual at the time. Apparently the players were told not to go out in groups of more than 3 because some locals might potentially throw a hand grenade at them. And they had the huge, interesting opportunity of actually going on one of the river boats along the River Saigon as well as part of their recreation for the game. But overall, actually, it was, putting that all to one side, it was a pretty unremarkable visit. But of course, it could have been very different because the games took place in December 1967, and that was just weeks before the Tet Offensive, when the Viet Cong and North Vietnamese People's Army of Vietnam launched a surprise attack on the 30th of January, so just over a month later, and over 80,000 North Vietnamese troops struck more than 100 towns and cities in the south. So it was a little bit of a lucky escape overall.
The Dallas Tornadoes draw both those games, which is probably the only time that the Americans avoid defeat in Vietnam in the 1960s.
That's so cheap, but it's quite brilliant, Graham, I have to say.
So unbelievably, they make their way out. Vietnam successfully making it out of there. They head to Taiwan via Hong Kong. Here we see that rare thing on this tour, which is a Dallas Tornadoes victory. So they beat the Taiwan national side 3-2. Once again, the crowd, supposedly 43,000 at that, and you can sort of see from some of the photos from there, it definitely looks a full house. We are getting towards Christmas, and there's the season ahead. It would be logical to get back for Christmas, I would have thought, but they choose to spend, rather than returning home, they head to Japan instead. So, Jamie, they spend Christmas in Japan. They play a game Christmas Eve and lose 2-1, and they play a game on Boxing Day and lose 3-2. But there's another element whereby, not only are this team pioneering in terms of a global tour and playing these games in the most extraordinary things, but there's another pioneering element from Bob Kap, isn't there?
Don't know if it is. Yeah, you're right. And they do play in Christmas Eve and they spend Christmas Day in Tokyo. And you're actually right. I mean, most of the players are young single men. They don't really have families to get back to, and they're bonding with their new friends, which is the Dallas Tornado team. But as I understand it, I think Bob Kap is a family man. He's away from his family for this entire duration, from his wife and his children. I'm pretty sure he had a family during this period. But what he's done, he's bonded with the boys, and he's keeping the boys bonding as well. So for Christmas, he decides that they have to get each other presents. And how does he decide to do this? He puts names in a hat, and they draw out the name, and then they have to get a gift for that particular player. Now, when I read this, I was thinking, this is Secret Santa. Everyone's done this. And I was curious, Graham. I was like, well, when did Secret Santa come in? And apparently Secret Santa started, there's a little bit of debate over this, but a guy from Kansas, Larry Stewart, who was a philanthropist, he is credited with being the first Secret Santa, where he would donate money to the homeless on the streets in Kansas anonymously. And he did this for many, many years, up until 2005, a year before he passed away with cancer in 2006. And then he actually announced that, he was the guy that was being this generous donator of gifts at Christmas anonymously. But Bob Kap's doing this already. So is Bob Kap, is he the originator of the very first Secret Santa? I don't know, Graham, but I like to indulge in this, and I like to think that Bob Kap is the originator of the Secret Santa that we do every single year.
So people in workplaces up and down the country have Bob Kap to blame for the additional stress and pain that's added around December time, in addition to getting presents for everyone else. So the tour rumbles on. The Tornadoes head to the Philippines, and they pick up a win. They pick up on New Year's Day. They pick up a 7-0 and a comfortable win against a what's described as a Chinese select 11. So not quite sure what kind of team that entails. They lose their other game in Manila against the Philippine side before the next leg of the tour, which of course has to be, having gone that far, they might as well go the whole way. So they head to Australia.
18 hours down to Brisbane from the Philippines. It's quite interesting listening to some of the accounts of some of the players that were on this tour. And there's one of the players who's also an English guy called Brian Harvey. We haven't spoken too much about the players. And again, Brian Harvey shouldn't be confused with
the 17 legend.
Discredited possible Brian Harveys. This is Brian Harvey of Dallas Tornado. Yeah, he talks about the comforts of Western culture when they arrive in Australia. And it's almost like, we're experiencing things that we're used to. And I don't think he speaks for everyone on the tour, because I think there's definitely some kind of induction into life experience that Bob Kap is trying to harness with these group of guys. They're in Australia. It's as close to the US that they've probably been on since they left Spain.
They lose their first game there, but they get a win against the South Australian side before heading down to New Zealand, play a couple of games down there, which they fail to win in. We are approaching the end of this tour, this ridiculous globetrotting tour. They decide to stop off in Fiji, which is a very, very wise decision. Who wouldn't want to stop in Fiji? Not only wise because of the opportunity to go there, but because they pick up consecutive wins, a 10-2 win and a 3-1 win. As temperature fans will be pleased to know, these are only 60-minute games because of the 102 degree heat, which they obviously deem to be too hot to play. They finish off against the Tahiti national team. That doesn't sound the hardest gig in the world, does it? Against Tahiti. That just sounds like a fantastic way to end any tour, which they lose 2-1 before they head back to... Well, they're on their way to Dallas, but they don't, which is kind of mid-February, but they're not fully back, are they?
This is one of the most baffling aspects of the whole endeavour, that after travelling all the way around the world, and with that close to kind of getting back home, they decide to go on a mini tour of Central America and play 4 games there as well. They must be utterly exhausted by this point and sick of hotels.
It is incredible. 7 months they've been on the road, changing location every couple of days. They get back to Dallas via Mexico. They have a stopover there, and as Phil's mentioned, they've been back for less than 2 weeks when they're preparing for the season, which starts in April. The season starts in 5 weeks' time. And they're buying stuff for their apartments, general living stuff. They're getting phone lines set up so they can actually start communicating with the world again. And we should remember as well, this is 1967, 68. Communicating was incredibly difficult at that particular moment. There's no smartphones. You had to do long distance phone calls, which would have been incredibly expensive and incredibly difficult. So the connection with your family members is going to be fleeting at best. And then on the 6th of March, they're in Costa Rica. They're continuing this incredibly, ridiculously long world football tour. It's as if the 7 months they've done already isn't enough preparation for the NASL season, the inaugural NASL season, which is due to start in April in 1968.
They had agreed, they thought that was probably it in their Bob Kap. I just don't think, I'd like to try us with a flat back 4, and I want to try Renshaw on the right. I want to give that a go, because I don't think we probably need a bit more time to try and see how that works at the higher altitudes of, or different altitudes of Honduras and Costa Rica.
There's a brilliant newspaper headline, "Home again, gone again."
Yeah, just extraordinary scenes. So that tour, Jamie, I'm sure you've done the maths on this, or maybe you have, Phil. What's their kind of end tally? Or what kind of distance or results or games? What have they done? What have they done over this period?
Well, I think it depends how you classify it, to be honest. So if you assemble the games in Spain and Morocco, bring in the World Tour, and then the mini tour of Central America afterwards, Dallas Tornado have played 49 games in just over 6 months, of which they've won 10, drawn 10, and lost 29. Probably lost a few pounds on the way through sweat and exhaustion. They've scored 82 goals and conceded 119 goals as they've travelled the world.
Actually, that's pretty balanced in goal difference, minus 30 or so.
They're fairly consistent in terms of scoring in most games. But I think this is the nature of the football, and you've already mentioned they're amateur players. They're probably playing against amateur teams as well, with a few rare exceptions. So, there's going to be a lot of mistakes in these games, and we all know that football is a game of errors. The more mistakes you make, the more chances you're going to get to score goals. It's a 20.4% win ratio. I don't think they were in it for the victories. I think life experience was a bit more telling. And I think they've travelled through 30 countries, because there's a few countries they go via, which they don't play games. So their passports are going to be full of stamps. Maybe a few players are missing stamps for India first time round, but generally it's going to be a pretty busy passport in terms of stamps.
We touched upon this a little bit at the top of the podcast, but in terms of an experiment, whether it's good preparation for the coming football season to spend 6 months travelling through 30 different countries, playing 49 games in a variety of temperatures and terrains, in terms of whether that's good or bad preparation for the season, can we draw any conclusions from Dallas Tornadoes' debut season as genuinely Dallas Tornadoes in the first genuine edition of the North American Soccer League?
It didn't get off to a good start, did they? So I think the team began the season on the 30th of March 1968, probably with high expectations from the local crowd, but they suffered a 6-0 home defeat to the Houston Stars. Kap was replaced as coach by Keith Spurgeon, who had an amazing kind of career in coaching before and after that, travelling the world. On June the 8th, so it's not long into the season, after another 3-2 loss to Chicago Sting. And unfortunately, this is the tragedy, I think, that Kap never actually kind of coached again, although he went on to do some kind of quite amazing things afterwards. And during their inaugural 32-game campaign, the Tornado only won 2 matches. They drew 4 and lost 26. So they had a goal difference of minus 81. This is probably where the journey ended as well for many of their players. I think only 2 of the players who had been on the world tour, as well as the kind of inaugural kind of season, would remain with the club. Most of the players were released. One of those players, I think he was retained, was Mike Renshaw, and he would go on to play for Tornado in later years, including playing for the Dallas Tornado in 1975 when he was in the starting lineup for a game against the New York Cosmos, which was Pele's first game in New York, which was an interesting fact I managed to pick up on the way.
I love it. Yes, it's a really tough season for the Tornadoes. It's a really tough season for the North American Soccer League, full stop, actually, because they managed to attract a lot of investors into setting up teams and so forth. It didn't really take off as planned. A series of those of the clubs had folded by the end of the season. In 1969, they do manage to continue the season, but this is another bizarre, it's a half and half. So the first half of the season, we are back to Dundee United representing Dallas Tornadoes and other teams representing other teams. And then the second half is the local players playing in 2 leagues. And by the end of that season, by the end of 1969, they are down to 4 clubs, and the North American Soccer League is in real danger of collapse, which is when the Rochester Lancers enter, one of 2 teams who persuaded to enter the North American Soccer League. Dallas Tornadoes, one of the founding members who survived, and Lamar Hunt is heavily involved in trying to find these other teams to play. So he's holding talks with the Rochester Lancers and others to try and persuade them to step up from other leagues to try and create enough to get that 6-team league. as we discussed on another podcast altogether, Rochester Lancers immediately win. A fantastic moment for them. And they are also, Rochester Lancers and Dallas Tornadoes are involved in the following season, 1971 season, in a moment's glory. So this transpires to be Dallas Tornadoes' fantastic moment. They win the North American Soccer League that year, but they are made to work for it. And this, given how hard they worked on that tour, perhaps we shouldn't be surprised that they would cope better. We can give you the full story back on our Rochester Lancers podcast. They're involved in a 3-game playoff semi-final with the Rochester Lancers. They had decided that the best way of settling these games was not to have something like a penalty shootout, which, of course, as we've discussed on the Cosmos podcast we did earlier, it involved a fantastic shootout approach, novel shootout approach. Didn't really take off elsewhere. They decided but before that had happened, they decided they didn't need something like that. All they would do is they would play 15 minutes of extra time, and if that didn't settle it, they'd play another 15 minutes, and then another 15 minutes, and another 15 minutes. So game 1, Rochester Lancers do win it in, I think it's the 5th period of extra time, or the 6th period. It's in their goal is timed in the 176th minute, the longest game of football I think that's ever happened. The Dallas Tornadoes win the return leg, and then the deciding game, that one is a mere 146 minutes, I think it is. Dallas Tornadoes do manage to play. They come out on top. They are rewarded, of course, by reaching the final playoff series where they will play Atlanta Chiefs. And Dallas Tornadoes do eventually come out on top of that, but not before another marathon first leg game. So Dallas Tornadoes proving their worth there. And Dallas Tornadoes do go on to last the course. Not that the North American Soccer League lasted all that long, but they are members throughout until the league collapses in 1980.
84. 1984, yeah.
84.
They go on this incredible pre-season tour, which includes a training camp and a secondary preparation for the new season. And as Phil's mentioned, they win 2 games in their 32 games, which is a 6.25 win ratio, which is, I think, for the teams that have played this volume of game that we've covered, I think it's the lowest win ratio we've ever covered, is over a course of at least a season, not just some of the one-off teams that we've covered. The total attendance is less than 49,000. We know from the time in Burma, Rangoon, Myanmar, as we call it nowadays, they were getting crowds of 45,000 in those games. So these players have had incredible experience, and I think that's kind of where we go with the summarizing of this particular team. The North American Soccer League just isn't ready at this particular moment. What I love about Lamar Hunt is that his vision is unwavering. He knows that soccer is going to be a big deal. I think he was talking to, he's a Kansas City Chiefs owner in the NFL. And I think he was talking to somebody back in the 2000s about what's his greatest achievement. And the question was very much pitched again against him responding with something about the NFL creating the AFC, merging the two, being responsible for the Super Bowl in terms of its name. And he said, my contribution to soccer, because I always knew that was the future. And we're seeing now in the MLS, Messi is playing in North America. The next World Cup is going to be held in North America. So I think although it's taken the United States a little bit of time to catch up with the rest of us in terms of this beautiful game that we love, Lamar Hunt got it immediately, and he knew it was the future. And even though it was going against the culture of American sports, he still doubled down and committed to it in his own respectable way. Great guy. He really is a great guy.
There is another legacy of his and of the Dallas Tornadoes. We talked about the the expats that made up the game at this stage. Initially, that was just kind of Latin American, European players coming in, just making up those initial NASL sides, and then ultimately the big names that we come to know came over: Pelé and Beckenbauer and George Best, etc., and Dennis Stewart, of course.
Good reference, Graham.
Yeah,
but actually, Dallas Tornadoes, Lamar Hunt is responsible for arguably the first big US national soccer star. So Kyle Rote Jr., who is the son of a American football player who is a highly successful player for the New York Giants, and his son played as a striker for the Dallas Tornadoes. And during that career, he did become the first American US-born player to top the scoring charts in the North American Soccer League, and was named Rookie of the Year in 1978. So Kyle Rote, highly successful soccer player in the US, but also, not only that, Kyle Rote is also a highly successful Superstars winner in the US. So obviously it hadn't occurred to me that Superstars wasn't just Brian Jack. So I kind of assumed that was the Superstars was, I think, a US program initially by the ADC network. And yes, Kyle Rote, he won Superstars in, well, let me tell you, he not only won it once, he wins it 3 different times. So he wins it in 1974, 1976, and 1977. So very much the Brian Jacks of American Superstars. Do you want to hazard a guess as to which sportsman won the Superstars in the US in 1975?
What sport they played?
He played American football, this chap, but he's maybe more famous for something else.
I'm absolutely sure it's going to be OJ. Yeah, absolutely.
It's OJ. Yes, OJ won Superstars in 1975. Just too good.
What happened to him?
So before we get round to ranking this team, we should also just catch up, Phil, on the man and the legend who made this happen, or who led this team of travelling sportsmen around the world. Bob Kap. He's obviously gets the shot at Dallas Tornadoes, and you say football management isn't for him. So what does he end up doing?
Crying shame, isn't it? With that experience that he's gained over multiple countries, that he never gets another chance to manage in football. But maybe his kind of greatest claim for fame is that he was instrumental in introducing soccer-style place kickers into the NFL. When he introduced the Dallas Cowboys coach, he convinced the Dallas Cowboys to travel to Europe. He had some experience of traveling to Europe, and to establish some coaching camps where they could get footballers, encourage some footballers to join them and see if they would make it in the NFL. And one of the players that the Cap introduced to the Dallas Cowboys was a chap called Toni Fritsch. He was an Austrian international, most famous for scoring 2 goals for Austria in 1965 when they battled back from 2-1 down against England to win 3-2 at Wembley. But Fritsch basically took to American football and place kicking like a duck to water. Even in the kind of coaching camp, he easily kicked the ball over the bar. He signed a contract on the spot, and by 1972 he became the Cowboys' first choice kicker and was on their Super Bowl winning team the same year. That is probably where he had the biggest interest in sport. But actually, from what you can kind of see now, and if you to kind of travel to the NFL Hall of Fame, as well as introducing goal kicking, Cap became an accomplished painter, and his work hangs in the NFL Hall of Fame and can be seen online as well as in person. So he has maybe less of an impact on football and more of an impact on American football.
Do you know what he did as well, Phil? I don't know if you picked this up in your research. Bob Kap when he turned his attentions to kickers in American football, he's a bit of a Craig Johnson, Graham, because he invented a different boot where the laces would have been on the outside of the boot or the inside of the boot, whichever way around you want to call it. Therefore, not in the middle. Therefore, to give the kicker more of an accurate connection to the ball and not have any kind of tied laces, potentially disrupting the flow of where the ball was going to go. So, yeah, he's a bit of a Craig Johnson as well.
Right. I think it's time we came to judging this team. We have 5 categories of greatness. All-time greats, true greats. Touch greatness, edge of greatness. Blink of greats, or our special bonus category, not necessarily great, but without them we wouldn't be where we are today. Jamie, where are you going?
Well, there's so many facets to this story that are just groundbreaking and fascinating, and we're never ever going to see a football tour of this type ever again. In terms of football tours, it's all-time greatness. There's no doubt in that. However, Bob Kap was more than just a manager. As we know, he's an entrepreneur, he's an inventor, he could turn his money to many things. He did everything as well for this team. He organised the games, he organised the travel, he organised the fixtures, he managed the morale, he managed the hotels, he was the trainer, he was the physio. I mean, an incredible individual that just invested so much time in this particular team. And then he's supported by the brilliant Lamar Hunt, who sits in the Hall of Fame of soccer in the United States, the Hall of Fame of North American football, and also the Hall of Fame of tennis. I mean, how many people can boast to be in the Hall of Fame of those 3 sports? And that doesn't even include the volume of Hall of Fames he sits in outside that, especially with the university as well that he's invested in massively. This is not about football for me. This is beyond football. This is about a group of guys coming together, young guys, having quite possibly the time of their life and experiencing the world in a way that we can only wish to experience it, exposed to so many different cultures that it can't help but grow you as an individual. They're following the sun the whole time as well. I mean, I can't imagine how amazing it would have been. And also playing in front of those crowds. It's incredible. You know, these are amateur footballers and they're playing in front of like 30, 40, 50,000 crowds, which they don't get back in North America. But as much as I love it, it has to fit in our special category. You know, it's not great. But without them, we wouldn't be where we are today because football tours do and are part of the norm. So without football tours, we wouldn't have Tottenham winning the Audi Cup. So for me, Dallas Tornado, 1967-68 is not great. But without them, we wouldn't be where we are today.
I'm not sure I want to be being stoned at the football match in Singapore, but apart from that, Phil, what do you reckon?
If you kind of go back to the reasons why the team was assembled and the tour was organised, it fell well short. The time wasn't right in terms of the promotion of soccer in the US. It probably raised the profile of Tornado, but certainly didn't set them up as a kind of global brand. And possibly, and most importantly, it was probably one of the worst preparations for a new season that there's ever been, really. I can't think of anything worse than
Leicester
that.
City, La Manga, maybe?
Yeah. But when I was a kid, it seemed to be Sunderland visiting the Isle of Wight, which was as exotic as it got. So I think in terms of the original intention for the tour and the team, it fell short. But the experience for the individuals involved, there's a really interesting radio program on BBC Sounds, which interviews some of the players around 10 years ago when they came together for the anniversary, where each of the players talked about their experiences. And one player in particular says, if I got the chance to do it again, I'd do it immediately. It was such a great experience. Some of the players stayed in the States, set up a new life. Other players kind of returned home, but none of them forgot what happened on the tour. So in that sense, it's such a brilliantly fantastic, romantic endeavour.
It's definitely all-time greats for ambition, Liquid greats for execution, and I think probably the happy house somewhere in between is not necessarily great. So I think we do all agree on this one. Dallas Tornadoes, 1967. Not necessarily great, but without them, we wouldn't be where we are today. Good stuff. We will leave it there. Phil, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Remarkable story. It's really enjoyed telling it with you.
Excellent. Jamie, thank you for crunching the numbers on that one.
Well, I think Phil did it again. I think he's definitely becoming the stat man.
That's all for this time. As a reminder, you can get hold of us on our socials on Blue Sky, Said and Done, and Couch Pundito. It's still on X in some way or another. And a reminder to sign up for our lovely newsletter. But we will join you again next time.